Another great episode of Curing Racism. I am your host, Simpson, the happiness engineer, along with my wonderful co host, Mr. Paul Hoyt. Together we come so that we can make an impact on this world, allowing us to focus on our CABs, which are common accepted beliefs that lead to our behavioral bias and reflexes, and we can hopefully create a better world. So, Paul, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing really good this morning. Well, it is afternoon, still in California. You're 3 hours ahead of me, so you're well into the future. But I'm doing good. It's a great day here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we've had some turmoil
So,
since our last show in America. You know, we've seen these raids that ICE has done has led to the death of a young woman. This death has led to two states suing the federal government for the ICE raids, and it has shown what happens when we don't address our biases. When we don't address our biases, they can become not only harmful but deadly.
amen to that. You know, when we created the book Curing Racism, one of the things that we discovered was this concept of tribalism and our tribal instinct, and how that, when coupled with our aggressive fighting nature, can lead to tribal conflict. And the polarization politically in the United States, I think, has really escalated to the framework of tribal conflict and deadly tribal conflict. Um, and that's one of the things we want to talk about today, is how to recognize tribal conflict, and what we as members of our own tribes can do about it, and I think should do about it, whenever we see the leaders of our tribes not acting in a way that we want them to. So, as Paz and I were talking a couple of days ago, there are two real tragedies here that are associated with this young woman's death. First of all, it was, the event itself. It was, a protest that went maybe a little bit over the line of being peaceful, and a total lack of restraint and a lack of good judgment from the police officer, the ICE officer who shot her. And that itself is a huge, huge tragedy of, someone putting themselves into harm's way, and then somebody overreacting like crazy, in my opinion, to do harm to that person who may have crossed the line in some way. But the bigger tragedy is the response of the tribal leaders. It's the response of the administration, who supported blindly, the act of a person operating in complete lack of restraint. I was thinking to myself about, how would I want my tribal leader to respond in such a situation? And it's so, so easy for speech writers to come up with a speech that is something like this, something that we wanted J.D. Vance or Kristi Noem or Donald Trump to say. We wanted them to say something like, "We are very disturbed at the events of today and the tragedy that unfolded. Um, there's no doubt in our minds that the courts will decide who was right and who was wrong, and if any judgment or crime has been committed in these cases. And we want to encourage all of those who are protesting to protest peacefully. And we want to encourage all of our officers to act with due restraint when it comes to performance of their duties. Again, we are disturbed by this situation. We encourage everybody to act with restraint, to protest peacefully, and our sympathies go out to the families of the people of Nicole Good."
I
You know,
think the best way to think about it is not to protest peacefully, but to act out of love,
I
right?
love
Because
that.
if we,
Let me finish, if I may.
yes, sir.
That took me 5 minutes to create. But instead, what we saw from our tribal leaders was, it was a response that encouraged more violence by them immediately condemning people and saying, oh, our guy was faultless. Oh, she crossed the line. Oh, she was trying to kill him. This is just an example about how the radical left, you know, you know, tries to murder our ICE officers. And that is such bullshit. We need to demand more of our tribal leaders and demand more of ourselves when it comes speaking up to let people know what we believe the right responses should be and what the right reactions to this terrible event could have been and should have been. Thank you for letting me share my piece there.
Thank you. Actually, thank you for sharing your piece and taking the time to be thoughtful enough to not just express it, but to take the time to really put together a message that makes sense. At this time, more than anything, what we need is sensible conversation, things that allow us to build bridges. That's why I was saying it's not about peaceful protest, but really acting out of love. If that act of love allows you to go out and protest, it should also allow you not to kill, right? It should provide you the proper restraint in order to allow you to really do what we said we're here to do, and that's create a better world, a more loving world, a more accepting world. So
Well,
if
I,
we act out of love, we empower our leaders, ourselves, our communities to not only see that action, but to be a reflection of those actions.
I would love for people to act out of love, but right now I'd be happy with peace and restraint. I think that comes first. Controlling your temper, controlling your emotions, emotional regulation, and restraining your activities and acting with good judgment comes first. And then we can, later on, we can elevate our consciousness and sing kumbaya and give each other a big hug and act out of love. Because that is the ideal, and that's what you and I both want. But right now, I would be satisfied with civility. I would be satisfied with
Amen.
integrity and respect and love can come after that, after we get control of ourselves. One other point I really want to make, I said it was, we can call upon our tribal leaders, the leaders of the Republican Party, the leaders of the Democratic Party, the leaders of whatever movement or tribe you consider yourself to be a part of, to act in a manner that is civil, that is conscientious, that is respectful, that is with integrity. But what we can't just stand by when they do not do that. It's up to each and every one of us to act in the way that we want all of us to act. It's up to each one of us to call out that behavior that we know is substandard and not acceptable, whether it's on the part of our neighbors, our family members, our brothers and sisters, the people that we work with, our managers in the office space, or our political leaders. Stand up, be a person of integrity, be a person of respect, and call other people out when they are not acting in a way that you think is beneficial to the society of whole. So I will call out those people who protest violently. We don't want that. And I will call out the people who act violently to please, have some restraint, have some compassion, have some composure. Don't react emotionally in temperaments. Be professional, be a kind, respectful human being towards yourself and towards other people.
I love that. I definitely love that you've reached out to people's sensibilities more than just their compassion, you know. And accountability is the word of the day, right? We cannot change anyone else's actions, but we can change our own individual actions, you know, as we teach our children, don't just do as I say, to do as I do. That reflection of what you do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis becomes who you are. And who you are can be a light to something different if what you see is not what you want, right? We all have an obligation actually to be accountable. We, if that officer was just accountable for a moment, right? Even when given the command, he would have saw an unarmed woman and would have realized that that was wrong, right? We get to choose right and wrong at every opportunity. And we get to be that reflection of what we want to see. If you want to see change in the world, be change in the world.
Amen. So you can tell from the way I talk passionately today that this is very disturbing to me to see leadership of any tribe, any community act in such a junior high school juvenile delinquent way. Let's call upon them to act in the ways that we want them to act. Let's let's call upon them to issue statements that facilitate compassionate disagreement, that facilitate democracy in the United States, that celebrate differences between people so that we can see beyond, as we like to say, see beyond the superficial differences that divide us, so we can discover the common values that unite us. And that all starts with some level of emotional restraint and compassion for people, no matter what political party they belong to, no matter what temple or church that they worship at, no matter what the color of their skin.
I love that. America is supposed to be the place where people strive to come to. At one point they called it the land of milk and honey. It is it was a place where people saw big ideals, right? And their dreams can come true. I watched Jesse Ventura say earlier today in an interview that America is now moving like a third world country because we now have our armies, our reserves acting like police. We cannot allow that to continue if we're ever going to be the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So I am disturbed by the events of this week. I look to the courts to decide who is at fault and if any charges should be brought against anybody. I encourage everybody to act peacefully, and I encourage those who have weapons, especially, to act with some level of restraint and compassion towards the people that they interact with. And I call upon each and every one of you to do the same, to think the same, to speak out in the same way, because that's why I think that we leaders of our own tribes, of our own families, should respond when crap like this happens.
Well, I always remind everyone you are the main character in your motion picture called life. At any moment, you can decide to be the lead, right? Because you're the main character, don't mean you're the lead. right? So we have to decide, especially in these times, who is going to lead and how are we holding ourselves accountable? Like, are we speaking in love or are we speaking in division? Are we speaking in elevation or are we speaking in lack? We get to pay attention to the levels of conversations that we have. We get to pay attention to the people that we connect ourselves to. We get to pay attention to how we perform when the pressure is on. Because the only thing we can change is us. Start with you, be accountable for you, and then find a friend. Help them be more accountable. Now you have an accountability partner, right? If you go by the Bible, it says when two or more minds come together, right, God appears. So now you have two people. Now you have a spiritual connection. Now you can build something again. Two can be four. Four can become eight. By us all just holding each other, each other accountable and holding ourselves accountable first. I am blessed to have an accountability partner like Paul, and Paul has an accountability partner like me. We're
Amen.
going to push ourselves to make sure that we are the best versions of ourselves, not just on this show, but everywhere that we go, so that we are the reflection that we want to see in the world. I cannot tell someone how to love if all I express is hate, but I can show someone how to love when I tell them how great they are.
Amen. So go forth and discover your own greatness. Decide who you want to be. Remember who you are when you're at your best. Remind yourself of how the how your role models in society really act and should act, and be the person that you want other people to be. Kind, wise, loving, confident, strong, patient, caring, understanding, accepting. There's so many virtues of the spirit that we can all embrace, day after day after day. And we certainly encourage you to do just that so that you can live the life that you want to live and enjoy the relationships that you want to enjoy and help make this world a better place. See through those superficial differences that divide us, discover the common values that unite us, and the world will be a better place for us and for our children and grandchildren. Pants, are you there? You're smiling, but I can't hear you. Oops,
And if you are, and I apologize for my last technical difficulty, but yes, and if you are a company, corporation, leadership group that wants to decide how you can get your teams to work together, that want to create a more cohesive work environment for your places, please go to curingracism.com, get a copy of the book, figure out how we can come to your situation and make your world a better place.
Amen. See you again next week, Paz. God bless.